Hey there, I'm the Communication Doc, and this is the next video in my series, How to Correct Common Communication Challenges. If you haven't watched the previous videos, please do so as each video builds on the previous ones. In this video, I'm continuing my discussion of how we can correct the common communication challenge of misunderstanding. And I want to talk about, in this video and the next video, some barriers to our accurate perception of other people. And these are important because when we don't perceive other people correctly or accurately, that's going to impact how we communicate with them and therefore create misunderstandings. So the first barrier to accurate perception is stereotyping. And if you've been watching my previous videos, I mentioned stereotyping a little earlier, but I'm going to talk about it in more detail now. So stereotyping is when we put a person into a group and then assign certain characteristics or attributes to the person based on that group affiliation. Now, on one hand, stereotyping is somewhat necessary for how our minds work. We have to have the capability of organizing information. We can't go into every new situation and every new person we encounter with a completely blank slate, or we would never want to encounter anything new. We would be constantly consumed by anxiety. So the fact that we're able to organize events and people and experiences into categories helps give us an idea of how to approach those people or events in the future and reduce our anxiety. So stereotypes develop because of interactions with people who are part of particular groups. And whenever I discuss this in my classes, I like to use a stereotype which is not offensive to anyone except potentially me, which would be college professors. And so I ask my students, tell me your stereotype of college professors. Now we know stereotypes can be both positive and negative. So they often mention a number of positive ones, like, well, they're intelligent, they're educated. There can also be some negative ones. For example, they're boring, they like to talk a lot. And then there are often as well some physical attributes. A lot of times they mention male. A lot of times they mentioned somebody wearing a suit, usually a male who's balding, possibly a beard or goatee, and glasses. So we even have kind of a physical idea of what a college professor looks like. And that may or may not be accurate. I tell them, of course, in the case of me as a college professor, I don't fit any of those stereotypes. Now, I do hope I fit the stereotype of being intelligent and educated, or I shouldn't be in the position that I'm in. So there are some aspects of stereotypes that we use because we've encountered enough people in that particular group that have those characteristics, and that's not necessarily a negative thing. Stereotypes become negative when we use them too rigidly. That is, if I were to have a student come into my class and they think simply because I don't meet their stereotype of a college professor, I couldn't possibly be a good professor, well, then we have a problem because they're not allowing me as an individual who does not fit some aspects of the stereotype to demonstrate that I do fit what is expected in the stereotype of a college professor. And that can be with any group. There may be some aspects of a stereotype that are proven correct when you encounter a person that would typically fit into that group. And there may be some aspects that are not. So while we might use the stereotype to initially give us an idea of how we could interact with a person, we have to use them flexibly. That is, we have to be willing to alter our stereotype, interact with people, find where they do and do not meet the stereotype, and adjust the stereotype accordingly. And then as we get to know people, we can interact with them on a more one-on-one basis rather than relying so much on the stereotype. So one of the barriers to accurate perception is relying inflexibly on stereotypes and not allowing people to break the rules, so to speak. And the problem is when we do that, we may either not want to interact with a person based on a stereotype, or we may treat them in a certain way that turns them off from wanting to interact with us. So don't hold the stereotypes too flexibly. And until next time, let's get communication healthy.